Welcome to People First by All Voices. I'm your host, Jeffrey Fermin, and I have a great guest with me, Danielle Farage. Oh, well, I never asked you how to pronounce your last name. Farage?
Farage. It's like garage with an
Farage.
F.
Okay, perfect. Now, yeah, it's good that we cleared that up, right? Now that we're besties. And why don't you let the audience know what you are working on nowadays?
Yeah, for sure. So, hi, I'm Danielle Farage. I like to call myself a relationship therapist for Gen Z and people who hire them. So, I work at the intersection of generational culture and the future of work and career storytelling. I'm also a content creator. And I really help companies better connect with young talent and help Gen Z also navigate a job market that might not be built for them. So my content kind of it spreads the gamut around those themes. Um, and at the end of the day, like a lot of the things that I do really surrounds like communication and how can we better connect with each other, communicate with each other in order to work better together. And yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
Heck yeah, and also a up and coming professional wakeboarder, from what I hear.
Apparently, I just came back from a wakeboarding session. Friday mornings are for wakeboarding, and yeah, I hit a huge milestone today and I dropped the rope. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, when you start wakeboarding or wake surfing, you hold on to a rope and you have to get to a point where you can like drop the rope so you don't need to rely on it. You like stay in the wake yourself. So, big milestone today.
Oh yeah, yeah. Always great when you have a hyphenate of sorts with that kid. Talk about complex topics like why Gen Z hasn't been, really entering the workforce, but can also, switch it up, do some wakeboarding, and be a
Oh yeah.
amateur or even borderline professional athlete. But perfect segue. You hinted at it right then and there with your intro. There's a lot of, I guess, friction with Gen Z entering the workforce. Recently, there's been articles saying that like a lot of entry level jobs are now being replaced with AI. Yeah, how's it looking down over there in the front lines? Like, what is happening? Clear things up for us, and yeah, want to hear it right from.
Yeah. So this week is actually a perfect time to talk about entry level work because there were two big stories that made headlines this week. The first one being that the unemployment rate for recent grads just hit 5.8%, which is over 2% higher than the national average and the worst percentage we've seen in over a decade. So that was some groundbreaking news. And secondly, we saw companies really trying to prevent churn in the first few years of entry level work. So Goldman Sachs is now asking their junior bankers to sign a loyalty oath every 90 days to stop them from getting poached by private equity firms. So these stories really highlight how much the entry level job market is shifting and how employers are kind of playing hardball in order to keep people and to retain really great talent. And also why we need to really rethink what early careers look like in an AI powered world.
Like, oh my God, oaths. Like that sounds kind of. I hate to say it. I just read a book about it, cultish. But like, yeah, it sounds cultish. Like that
Very
sounds
Black
insane.
Mirror.
Is it that much of a, I guess, like employer centric market right now that people feel like they could just get away with this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, I talk a lot about how there's such a lack of training. And the part of the reason is because companies don't want to invest in people and spend all this money training them if they're just going to walk out the door, 18 months in. And I think that's pretty valid, but I think the other style of leadership that I'm probably a bigger proponent of is to just create such a great experience of work and such a great culture that people don't want to leave and that they always feel like they're growing, they feel like they're learning, they're moving up, and that they actually don't want to leave your organization instead of kind of forcing them to stay or making them sign an oath. I think it's just a difference in leadership, one of them being more trust focused and one of them being a little bit more fear driven.
Yeah, and God, you hitting a lot of great points right now. Dissatisfaction rates have been low since when I got my first start in the HR tech world since 2011. I think employee engagement rates, there's only like 10% of employers back in the day that were actively engaged, right? You mentioned a lot about community or culture building and just like having a good psychologically safe culture that people feel comfortable where they're able to thrive in. So I saw those problems, what, 14, 15 years ago? God, I'm old now. But yeah, I saw those problems early on, and I'm seeing a lot of the same arguments being made for this next generation. Like I was that millennial and we heard it all like, oh, we're not motivated. You don't want to do some of these things. Seen some articles that are citing those same reasons. Like, oh, Gen Z folks might not be as motivated, professional. Do you want to debunk that some right now?
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying people don't want to work and that they're entitled for many, many years. I think one of the biggest problems that's facing the workforce right now is that many generations just simply like don't talk to each other. We don't necessarily make the space to get to know each other very well outside of the our daily Zoom sessions, and the work itself. And I think that a lot of also like the political polarization that's going on in the world is really, it's becoming very evident in our workplaces, as well as the generational gaps, right? So if you think of and you look at like a lot of the studies out there about the different viewpoints of each generation, the gaps between generations, specifically Gen Z and Boomers or Gen Z and Gen X, are very wide. Even between Gen Z and Millennials, as far as, one example is like, how much do you have to be making every year to be considered successful, right? That was one of the studies that came out last year. And Gen Z said close to $600,000 a year. You had millennials saying closer to, I think, like 180. Gen X was saying 250,000, and then boomers were saying like 90,000. So even just between, those numbers, you can kind of see that we're not really on the same page about that, but also a lot of things. And so if you have such a vast disconnect and you're not necessarily making time to talk to one another and learn about each other's lives and your challenges, and you might be a little bit far removed from your 20s, yeah, of course, some behaviors are going to seem entitled. I'm not saying that, there's no entitlement or there's, no bad behavior or there's no laziness. Every generation has that. But on the whole, I do believe that Gen Z is extremely motivated. They're driven by, efficiency. They definitely want to succeed. They're driven by wanting to develop themselves and constantly stay kind of, up to date on their skills, because we know that we're going to need to have like several different careers. It gets up to like nine or maybe more. Plus careers in our lifetimes in order to stay relevant. And so we're very motivated by that kind of growth.
Funny enough, there was this like I don't know if it's a meme or however you want to phrase it, but there was just like this online video I saw of news clippings throughout generations, like 50s, 60s.
Yeah,
Oh, people don't want to work. 70s, 80s, like Gen X doesn't want to work. Boomers don't want to work. Like early 90s, Gen X is the lost generation. Like,
right.
oh my God, they're not going to work. And civilization is going to be at its like downfall because of that. Like, why is this? Why do you think it's a cyclical thing? Like, why do you think, is it like news outlets just wanting to get some clicks? Is it actual things that are happening in workplaces? Like, why do you think this happens?
Well, I read an article a couple years ago that was talking about, these kind of low level jobs, retail jobs, like jobs that don't really require much brain effort. Them being, and not to say that all retail jobs don't require brain effort, but I'm saying like, if you're at a cash register versus if you're, in deep work on AI, are
Yeah, don't
very
worry,
different
we aren't
jobs.
going to take that out of context.
Yeah, I'm like, I really do respect people in retail because it's a hard job in a different way. But my point being that in every society that, is in its later stages, one of the biggest signs of that is that people don't want to do those kind of mindless jobs. The jobs that right now are maybe being taken over by machines and AI, right? And by technology. And so I think that's like one of the reasons why we're seeing this this kind of trend and this type of language being used. But it's not new. But I would say that, to build on like my earlier point, it's we're not talking to each other But we're also experiencing different challenges. And you take like someone young who might be at a company, maybe be like 3 years into their career, they're at a company for 18 months. And if they leave and go to another job, they might be looked at by someone older as like, oh, wow, they like didn't stay there for any time. Like they're a job hopper. That might be taken, out of context. But when you put it back into the context, that person might be dealing with a toxic work environment. That person might be really concerned about their career growth because they might be in a role that is maybe being taken over by certain tools. That person might be dealing with, increased costs and needing to find a higher salaried job. So I feel like there are so many factors as to why people move around and not necessarily job hop, but I mean, if you look at the average time someone spends in tech at a company, it's like less than 18 months. So I think we need to like be less judgmental and start asking a little bit more of questions.
Agree with you 100%. I feel like right now is also a competitive job market. Every time I like go on LinkedIn, there's just like a new story being written about, how people are one having trouble finding jobs, and on the other end of the spectrum, like there's too many applications to deal with. That said, I feel like you do a great job on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on these things of putting yourself out there, advocating for Gen Zs, the whole generation, and like helping them kind of find their way in their career. And with that said, what tips would you have for this generation in standing out, in making sure that they could get some jobs, and most importantly, finding a job that they are actually passionate and care about?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. I would say, I mean, like based on all the layoffs in tech right now, especially and consulting, I would think to look at industries that are actually hiring. Right, like that's kind of the first step, and think about where your strengths lie and where those strengths line up with roles and how they line up, and then think about which companies more specifically you'd want to work at. Um, but as far as like the entry level question, right, I would say to look for companies that are actually investing in the entry level experience and who are actually even rethinking what entry level looks like, right? Because you take the industrial industry for example, they've already gone through their first wave of this kind of innovation and what the innovation does to the industry, to roles, to how people's jobs change and evolve. And so if you're looking at that industry as an example, you think of Amazon having warehouses full of robots. The way that a kind of factory line worker job has evolved is maybe overseeing the process, right? And overseeing the robots or fixing the robots or customer service. And like you kind of have to fill in the gaps of where the opportunity actually is and how do your skills and strengths align with those particular roles. But I would look for companies that maybe have even gone through that type of transformation, that offer project-based apprenticeship programs, that offer paid trials on rotational programs, that offer in-house certification and training and specific job pathways, who are thinking more critically about what an entry level job actually means. Because when I talk to people, even this past summer, interns who are at big banks, right? Like they're kind of doing mindless tasks. And those types of opportunities, in my opinion, are going to dry up even more the following summer and the one after that. Of course, some organizations are going to maybe keep sorts of training because it teaches you how to be thorough and how to how the process evolves. But I think over time, there's going to be a new process. And so if you're an entry level, job seeker, I would say you want to find people who are doing maybe the things that you're interested in and ask them more questions about what that really involves, what types of skills you need to know, and yeah, definitely find some mentors to help you along the way.
Yeah, you touched on like a lot of great things
I
there, and I
know.
have to comment on it. No, you did great, and I love the fact that you're already thinking about like, oh, instead of think maybe potentially thinking about like working a Amazon warehouse, like why not think about like it's going to be replaced by robots one day? Maybe work on like the QA for the robots. And the second part, obviously, that
Yeah.
you alluded to towards the end was a lot of these jobs that exist currently, these finance internships, like say GPT or some kind of agentic AI system is going to make those fields completely irrelevant. So yeah, you almost have to be one step ahead of the current job market and say like, what's going to be the next job that's going to be on top of that, which is kind of difficult because you have to use your imagination a little bit.
I mean, you
Um,
could also ask AI. Like you have to train yourself to think in that way because we live in that type of world where things move so quickly. And if you want job security, which in my opinion is probably going to be more of a thing of the past. I think we're going to work more like contractors and have multiple clients at the same time. But if you want more job security, I say this to people all the time, even who are more years into their career, be the person who is on the nose, who like knows what's going on, and who is constantly looking for ways to integrate new tools, new systems to do things more efficiently. Not to say that you have to force other people to do that, but it's really good to know how to do that for yourself, and to kind of be known as that person. And I think that's the way to have job security, at least right now.
Right. I feel like we covered a lot. I want to end this on a silly note just because I feel like we should have a little fun here.
Yeah.
There's a decent age gap between myself, my younger sister. It's 14 years. I'm like old head millennial. She calls me Unk. So, and she's obviously Gen Z. Are there any slang phrases that we should be introducing into the workplace? I love Gen Z slang. I love saying things like cringe and slay. So I have to ask you, a thought leader in the space.
Gosh. I really like alpha. Like, not to say, I think like many Gen Zers would say like, no, don't, use slang in the corporate world because it's like cringe. Even like cringe is now cringe, right? So like I like alpha because it's like, oh, like, you're kind of describing something as alpha or beta, and like beta is kind of bad and alpha is really good, instead of like, that's amazing or whatever. So I think it's a good way to give feedback.
I I'll drop my favorite one, aura. I love when people say, "Oh,
Or
that person's got aura." And yeah, just the way it's used, like if somebody makes like a shot in basketball, or I don't know, I guess in the context of work, maybe they like nailed a presentation, you just say like aura. Like it just sounds cool.
it
Thank
does.
you for just having a silly little question at the end. I know that's kind of unexpected in these chats, but I had to switch it up on you.
All good.
All right, Danielle Farage. I'm gonna post your like LinkedIn, post your Instagram, your socials. You're doing a lot of great things in the space. It's very inspiring. I'm gonna keep on following you. I hope that all the listeners and people that subscribe to our newsletter when we post this out, they start following you, not just for tips on Gen Z, but even like how to hire Gen Z. Would love to see that happen. But yeah, can't thank you enough for spending some time with us, and yeah, look forward to posting this.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
You have aura.
Thanks.
On that note, we'll jet on out of here.